Pictures. Pictures can be invaluable. The other day I was cleaning my office and I come across a couple of photos. Here's a photo of my dad and I up at Huntington Lake fishing. Then I came across another one of my son up on my dad's hay truck. It's hard to believe he was ever that small. Pictures are just wonderful. And in the Old Testament and the New Testament, we have some pictures that we ought to take a look at. One is the ordinance of the Passover, and that is in Exodus chapter 12, verse 43, we read, "And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, This is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall be no stranger eat thereof. But every man's servant that is bought for money, when thou hast circumcised him, then he shall eat thereof." And so here you see this wonderful ordinance of the Passover. And God is saying that this is for the nation of Israel, but there is an entrance point, and it's open to all that will come according to the Lord's requirements. And that requirement at this time was circumcision. And so he was open to that. Now, the Passover, as you know, was at the end of the plagues. And what they had to do was they had to slaughter a lamb. After they looked at it, this was a spotless lamb, and they would slaughter it. They took the blood and they painted it over the doorpost and the lintel. And then when the death angel came over, he passed over them. There were many more components to this, and I would encourage you to go and look at those components: the salt water, the bitter herbs, the cleansing of the house to make sure there was no leaven. These are all very important, and these are things that we can learn from the picture. So I'd encourage you to take a look at it. Interesting enough is that these Old Testament ideas are brought right into the New Testament. Today, there seems to be a mindset that things are severed and cut off, but that's not so. You see, the Lord's Supper was brought about out of the Passover. If you go to the book of John, you'll remember when the Lord excused Judas, that it was here that we began to see the Lord's Supper coming. And when you look at the other accounts, you'll see the Lord's Supper instituted out of the Passover. He takes those elements and he implements the Lord's Supper out of it. Some people might call it communion, but this is what we're talking about. Now, there's also another picture, and that is the picture of baptism. And we see that Paul, when he's writing to those in Colossae, that he ties baptism with circumcision. Now, we're going to start reading in verse 10. But verses 11 and 12 are really key. Colossians 2. "And ye are complete in him who is the head and the principality and the power, in whom also you've been circumcised with the circumcision made without hands, in putting off the body of sin of the flesh and the circumcision of Christ." And so we know that as we've looked this week, that like in Jeremiah 4:4, it's going to be the circumcision of the heart. These are the things that he's talking about. Now look at this tie. Verse 12, "Buried with him in baptism, wherewith you also were risen with him through the faith, the operation of God, who hath raised him from the dead." And so we see this tie. Baptism is incredibly important. And if you've been to a baptism here at the Clovis Missionary Baptist Church, you'll know that I'll often read Romans 6, and starting usually in verse 4, "Therefore we are buried with him by baptism to death, like as unto Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we should walk in newness of life. For we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, we should also be in the likeness of his resurrection." And so this right here is a picture of the old man dying. and being raised in newness of life. The putting away of the flesh. You can see that it's the picture of that circumcision, of cutting that flesh away, dealing with that, and living a clean life. One of the other pictures of baptism is the mikvah in the Old Testament. There was some ceremonial cleansing. And so there are so many pictures that go on as it relates to baptism. And the whole idea was preparation for service of God. And so we see that scriptural baptism is really important. And that is three components. Is you have to have the right candidate. The individual must be saved by grace. The other is you have to have the right mode. It has to be immersion. It says buried together with him. Christ, when he was buried, he was all in the tomb, the whole thing. It wasn't sprinkled or poured or anything like that. And lastly is the right authority. Jesus went to John, and that was the right authority. And so the baptism is instituted by the Lord, and he sets down the requirements. And so those that took the Lord's Supper, they had all been baptized by John. They came out of John's ministry, and so they had already had that taken place. These pictures are really important to get a hold of. And I would encourage you to really do some study. What is the Passover? What is circumcision? What is baptism? What does it mean? What is the Lord's Supper? What is the church? These are things that I think that are vitally important, that has really gotten lost today. We need to be individuals that really know what the Lord would have. Because I'm going to tell you that it's really a sad thing when you lose pictures. It's really a sad thing when you don't really know what's really going on and don't have a clear idea. I would encourage you to study that out. If I can be of any help whatsoever, please feel free to contact me. May God richly bless you.